Good day everyone. Welcome to the Autodesk Fusion 360 Rendering and Visualization webinar presented to you by myself, Ron Burkle from Modena OneSolve. On today's agenda, we have navigating to the rendering workspace, the setup tab, in-canvas rendering, render settings and options, and then we will have some time for a Q&A afterwards where you can ask questions if you have any. Now we will have a look at how to navigate to your rendering workspace from any other workspace. Currently, we are sitting in our design workspace. To get to the rendering workspace, you will go to the top left hand side corner where it says design. You will click on the drop down, and then you will be selecting your rendering workspace. This will take you to the rendering environment where you can change and edit and adjust your appearances, your scene settings, your decals, the texture map controls. You can do in-canvas rendering, and then you can also do final renderings. Next, we will be having a look at our setup tab. So in your rendering workspace, there's going to be 3 tabs in your ribbon. The first tab is going to be your setup tab. And then you will have your in-canvas render tab and then your final render tab. So in your setup tab, you will have your appearance function. If you click on your appearance function, it's going to bring up the pop-up menu. Within the pop-up menu, you will be able to change the appearances from your model to anything that you like. You can use the Fusion 360 material library as shown here. So I want to change the exhaust pipe on this dirt bike to a satin titanium finish. To do that, I will be dragging my chosen material from my material library within Fusion 360 and dropping it onto my exhaust pipe. This will change the material. As you have seen, the material changed to the satin titanium finish that I wanted. In the top section of this dialog box, you will see there's all the materials that is currently in use with your model. So if you add a new material to your model, it will show up in this section. You also have the ability to select bodies or components, entire components, or only faces. So I used a body to do the exhaust pipe. Now I'll show you how to use a face. You will have to select or tick the face box there, and then you need to select your face that you want to apply your material to. I will be using the carbon fiber material that's already in my model, and then I will be dragging that onto the face that I selected. Now you can see only the face changed material and not the entire peg like the exhaust did. We will now be looking at the scene settings function within your setup section. If you open your scene settings, you will see there's a pop-up window with 2 tabs. There's a settings tab and the environment library tab. We will be looking at the settings tab first. The settings tab has a brightness adjuster. This allows you to adjust the brightness of your scene. There's also a position adjuster. This allows you to adjust the position of your scene or rotate your scene around your model to get the perfect lighting conditions. As you can see, as I'm adjusting it, the light turns around my model. Do not forget to untick your position box when you have finished adjusting your scene. Then you get the background. You have a choice between an environment background or a solid background. The environment background is going to pull a background from your environment library that you have chosen. If you choose a solid background, you have a choice to make it whichever color you wish. As you can see now, I'm going to change the background to red, and then I'm going to click apply, and it will apply a red background to my scene. If I change it back to gray, it is going to apply the gray background to my scene again. Then you have your ground section in your settings. You have the ability to add in a ground plane, which allows you to show reflections and shadows in your render. If I tick the reflection box now, you will see there's a reflection that shows up on the surface. If I untick my ground plane, you will see that the reflection and the shadow disappears. Underneath your reflections, you will see there is a slider. This slider allows you to make your reflection rougher or clearer. The higher you push the slider up, the rougher your reflection is going to be. If you pull the slider down a bit, it is going to be a clearer and sharper reflection of your model. You also have a flatten ground option. This spreads the ground or stretches the ground out to make it appear as if you are placing your object onto the surface of something. As you can see here, if I stretch the ground or if I flatten the ground, it stretches the background and then it seems like my object is placed closer to the surface. And it gives it a little bit of a more realistic look. Then you have your camera settings. Within the camera, you have three options. You have orthographic, perspective, or perspective with autofaces. If you select your orthographic option, it's going to give you a very flat image. This is normally a view that you will use when designing. If you choose perspective, it is going to give you a more realistic look to your rendering image, as if you would have seen it in real life. If you choose perspective with auto faces, there is some faces on your model that will still appear orthographic. You also have the ability to change your focal length. As you can see, if you move your focal length slider up, then it gives it a flatter image. If you move it down, it gives you a more 3D realistic looking image. Now we are going to look at the exposure settings. You have the ability to change the exposure of your model. If you move your slider up, you will have a bright model. If you move your exposure down, you will have a dark model. You can also add a depth of field to your render by ticking this box. You can choose the center of focus by selecting your center of focus point and then clicking where you want it to be. Just be aware that if anything in front of your center of focus point is going to be out of focus, anything behind it is going to be in focus. You also have the ability with the depth of field to change the amount of blur you add to your image. This will also give it a more realistic look when finished rendering. Now for aspect ratio, there is a bunch of preset aspect ratios that Autodesk has already put there for us. But if you do not want one of those, you also have the ability to create your own aspect ratio within this section. Now for the environment library, there is a few default environments that you can choose from, or you can add your own custom environment by clicking on the folder. To add an environment to your scene, you just drag and drop the environment that you want on the scene. If you want the background to be the environmental background that you chose, you have to change that in the settings. See, for now, if I use the field background or field environment, it shows the field background. Now I use the photo booth environment, so it showed the photo booth background. Now we're going to have a look at the decals or the decal settings. The decal settings allows you to add an image from your computer to your model. So if I want to add this image of the dirt bike onto the frame, I will select the image and then I will click on the frame or the face of the frame that I want to add it on. With these arrows here, you can move your image up and down or left or right, or you can rotate your image. If we look at the texture map control, this allows you to change the mapping of your texture. So if I select the tail piece over here, and I go to the cylindrical projection type, you will see I will be able to change the way the texture is applied to my model. So I can rotate the texture, I can change the direction of the texture in any way that I want. You can also make the texture longer or shorter or wider. There's multiple options underneath the projection types. If you look at the display mode, this gives you a paper-like layout that allows you to see in more detail what your texture is going to do when you adjust it. Now we're going to have a look at what in-canvas rendering is and how it works and what it does. The in-canvas rendering is a feature that allows you to render your image in real time while you are busy figuring out the best lighting solutions for your render. So if you click on that in-canvas render button in your ribbon, this is going to start your rendering cycle. In the right hand side bottom corner, you will see a timeline with elapsed time, iteration numbers, and suggested stopping points. This will give you an estimate time of or estimate timeline of when your image is going to be at the best quality it can be. So if I just fast forward this a little bit here, then you will see I will stop it at the excellent suggestion, and now you will see that my image drastically changed into a better quality image than the grainy one before. But be aware that every time you rotate your image, it is going to restart your elapsed time and rendering cycle because it has to re-render your image in the new orientation that you moved it in. There is a play and pause button at the timeline in the bottom right hand corner where you can stop the cycle, and then you can choose to capture the image that is currently displayed if you are happy with the image. You can also select custom resolutions, and you can save it as a different type of image if you wish to. If you click OK, it will bring up a Save As box where you can select what type of file image or image file you want to save it as and what you want to name your image and where you want to save it. So you have options between PNG, JPEG and a TIFF file. Let's have a quick look at the in-canvas rendering settings. So if you go to the in-canvas rendering settings button at the top, you have an option between a fast and advanced rendering settings. The fast setting allows you to get a quick glimpse of what your image will look like when it has finished with the rendering, and the advanced setting is going to use more of your computer's resources to produce a more accurate image that will be displayed after your image has been fully rendered. You can pause or stop your in-canvas rendering by unticking or clicking the in-canvas rendering button that you clicked before. Let's have a quick look at the final rendering tab in your rendering workspace. This is the tab that you will be using for final renders and that you can create the best quality images with. Now we'll be looking at the final button in the rendering workspace, which is your final rendering settings. If you click on the button, it will bring up a pop-up window like this. Within this pop-up window, there will be 5 tabs. You have a web tab, a mobile tab, a print tab, a video tab, and a custom tab. These tabs will give you the recommended quality and image sizes for your purpose. Like for the web tab, or if you go and render your image in the web tab, it's going to give you the best quality and image size that will work the best for web applications. So now that we're looking in the web tab, you can see there's the image size 800 by 600 at 0.5 megapixels, or there is a 1024 by 768 by 0.8 megapixels, or 1280 by 1024 with 1.3 megapixels. This will change from wherever you go. So now that we are looking at the mobile tab, you see there's a 960 by 640 with 0.6 megapixels, a 1334 by 750 with 1 megapixel, and a 2048 by 1536 with 3.1 megapixels. In these tabs, you can choose to render it either with the cloud or on the cloud, or with your local machine. If you render it on the cloud, you will need to use what Autodesk calls flex tokens. You can use the flex tokens to do a standard cloud render or a final cloud render. A standard cloud render will be a lower quality image or less time spent rendering image than a final quality version. The final quality version will give you the best results for rendering on the cloud. If you go to your local rendering settings, you will see that there is advanced settings that you can turn on or turn off. If you turn on your advanced settings, you can choose a draft, standard, final, or excellent quality from these settings. The draft quality will be the lowest quality but will have the quickest turnaround times for rendering your images. The excellent quality will be the best quality but will have the longest turnaround time for your rendering images. You can also select on the custom tab, you can choose custom image sizes, aspect ratios, exposure, and file format. You can also change your width and height for your pixels for the rendering. You can also have a transparent background added to your image, or a transparent background that will remove the background from your image if you want to use a program to Photoshop your rendered image into something else. Here is some rendered images of the dirt bike that I used as demonstration for today. As you can see, the results are pretty good, and you can get really good quality images from using the software and services that is available with Fusion 360. Thank you everyone for joining the Autodesk Fusion 360 rendering and visualization webinar of today. I hope you enjoyed the session and I hope that you learned something new. It is open for discussions and questions at the moment. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the discussions tab in the Teams meeting and I will answer them as good as I can. If you do not have any questions, thank you very much for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your day.